Well, you reminded me about a job that I did with Graham's. It was to lay a 5-foot diameter pipeline from, I can't even remember the place in Craigavon, out to Loch Ney to discharge into Loch Ney. At 5 feet was a big pipe. But it was a straightforward job. Just dig a trench, put the pipe in, and fill it over again. Though it was a wee bit more complicated than that, in that each joint in the pipe had to be pressure tested to make sure that it was absolutely sealed. Mm-hmm. So, in order to do pressure testing, you needed to fill up the pipe and with another pump up the pressure of the water in the pipe to a particular value. Mm-hmm. And if it held at that value for 24 hours, then that was a test completed and successfully. The final part of that, where it discharged into Loch Ney, we had at that end a chamber where the pipe came into that chamber, and then a concrete chamber, which we built. And then the pipe went out from there into the lake, into Loch Ney, into the lake. And it had to, where it came into the chamber, it was at ground level. It was just around about ground level. But where it went out of the chamber, it was about 7 or 8 feet down below that. Mm-hmm. And that was below the lake level. So how did we get we were able to build the chamber all right, concrete chamber, but how did you connect the pipe out into the lake? And we needed a diver to do that. Interestingly enough, as I think about it now, that was at the time, it must have been about 1970, because it was the time of the severe troubles in Belfast, IRA, all that sort of thing, and the pressure gauges and so on that we needed were in a depot which was in Indian country in Falls Road, and nobody wanted to go down there. So of course I did. At that time I was in the Samaritans, yes, and the Samaritans had a very good rapport with both sides of the community. So as a Samaritans guy, I felt I was probably safe enough. So yes, I did that. I collected the stuff, and there really wasn't any drama in that. The drama came then whenever we did making a connection with this pipe below the lake level. Mm. And we needed a diver for that. But we couldn't find a diver who was available or whatever. And I was under some pressure to get the job done as quickly as possible. So I said I would do it. So I borrowed from Sir John Graham his diving equipment, his scuba diving stuff, along with lead belts and lead boots that would keep me down on the underwater. So, so I had this big flange with bolts going through it to be connected underwater and screwed up, and I found that the air containers that I had been given by Sir John, they didn't seem to work properly. So, and I tried 2 or 3 times to make them work, and I was drowning and so on. So no, it didn't work. So I thought, well, will use a piece of tubing, tubing that's used for pneumatic drills. Yeah. So the tubing, I connected that to a mouthpiece and instructed the foreman to look after the top end of it. And while I went down with this thing and eventually screwed up something like 24 bolts underwater.
My goodness.
Underwater. But it was fun. And I had no experience of water. I couldn't swim.
Oh, I know.
And,
that's what I'm thinking.
But it was the force of necessity. It needed to be done.
Yeah.
I couldn't get anybody else to do it. Right, I'll do it.
Well, that was quite an achievement then.
It was fun, yes. And it was an achievement as well. I had to go back and I complained to John Graham about his air tanks.
Okay. And did he apologise?
He thought I'd done good.
Oh, did he?
He thought I'd done good.
Oh, well, that was good.
Well, that was a fun thing. I must have been, that may be what Joe was referring to. That long pipeline, that had to be inspected from the inside. And you went from one manhole to the other manhole with torches. And some people would get claustrophobic in there. Yes. And we had one junior engineer that I wanted to do the job, and he came out in heebie-jeebies. So we didn't ask him to do it again. No. So I decided I would do it. And
my goodness, you're a good one.
And that worked all right. That worked all right.
You mentioned the Samaritans there, and that was something I had in my head to ask you about because you hadn't mentioned it so far. I don't remember even when that was that you were in the Samaritans.
Well, I must have joined, I was thinking about it fairly recently. I must have joined about 1968, I think.
Oh, really? Right.
It was after the Lockheed motorway was finished. I was back in head office in Dromore. One of the engineers there in the head office was a guy called it should come to me. His name is Quinn, but Noel Quinn.
Okay.
Noel Quinn was an engineer. He was quite a deal younger than me. He would have been, 25 or something like that. But he played rugby for Ulster. And a very thoroughly nice guy. He and I didn't see a lot of each other, but we got on very well. And he came to me in the office in the Graham's office, and he said, "Roy, I'm going to Africa on missionary work." And I knew that he was he was a committed Christian, but he never tried to impose it on anybody. But he was a committed Christian, so he was going on missionary work. He said, "I've been in the Samaritans for a number of years, 3 or 4 years, and I'm leaving, so I'd like somebody to replace me." And he said, "I think you would do the job." And I said, nothing at all about the Samaritans, but I would want to tell you, I'm atheist. And he said, "Fine, no problem." He said, "The Samaritans are completely irreligious. And that's not a problem at all." So he said, "Can I take you down and introduce you?"
Right.
So that was that, and I was introduced and went through a 2 or 3 week induction course, and all of that went very well, very smoothly. I ended. Betty allowed me out.
Well, I'm sort of wondering what Mum's attitude to it all was.
She was quite supportive.
Good.
She was quite supportive. So yes, I did 2 or 3 weeks with some sort of induction course, and then I did about usually one night a week, sometimes more, but usually one night a week. That would take you down about 7 o'clock and you'd stay to 11. There was supposedly always 3 people manning the place all the time. So I was one of those 3. And we did have a steady clientele.
Yep.
And I seemed to be sympathetic in talking to people, and I got on well with them.
Yep.
They got on well with me, and I listened to what they were saying. And then it was very necessary to write a report on exactly what had happened and what the issues were. So I was good at that too.
You would have been, yes.
I was good at that too. So that was, I enjoyed it. I can't remember how long it was before I was invited to become a Sir Martin companion.
Oh.
And that was, the companions were a select number who were responsible for about 6 or 7 other volunteers. And if any of them were having a problem in confrontation with someone, then they could ring their companion. And try and see that they could sort it out. So I felt quite honoured to be.
Yes.
I can only imagine that it was the standard of my written reports which gave the powers that be the impression that I would be good at it. And I think it was.
You would have been, Dad. It's not just the written stuff, it's all those interpersonal skills that you're so good at. And the compassion and empathy and acceptance. So how long were you in the Samaritans?
Well, I can tell you why I left. I left in 1974, whenever I joined JMJ. And suddenly I was away from home at long periods of time. So that was the end of that.
So you must have been there for a few years then?
5 or 6 years. Yeah.
My goodness. Did you know he was in the Samaritans? You did?
At the time I did, yes.
Yes. I remember one time, it was a Saturday, and you must have been on the night before. And there was a person in Lisburn, and you obviously didn't tell us any details, but you were concerned about them. And went to the house, and I was in the car with you, and I sat outside. I think Mum was probably in the car as well. And we just sat outside. You wanted to go and check on the person up in, I think it was the old Warren Estate, or yeah.
I needless to say, I can't remember that.
No.
I can remember one instance where the phone call came through in the evening. I was on. I answered the phone. It was a guy in distress on the other side, and he said, "I've just cut my wrists." And I said, "Where are you?" And he said, "I'm in a phone box," and wherever it was, can't remember exactly. It was off the Donegal Pass. So I said, "Look, bandage up your wrist for the moment. I'll be with you in 5 minutes." And the office at that time was in the lower Lisburn Road.
Yes, yeah.
So it was, I jumped into the car and ran, and there he was in the thing. So I got him out into the car and took him to emergency.
Yeah. Oh, Dad.
But you felt that you were doing something useful. You didn't really feel that there was something good in that.
Well, there's a link between that and your daughter being a social worker.
No.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Similar.
Absolutely.
Similar kind of thing. Yeah.
So that was that. Yes.
Yes.
That was that. Those are interesting times, and yes. In John Graham's, I worked with Cecil Totten. I think I mentioned it. Pernickety little man. He was the director of the company. He had a Rover 2000. The rest of us had Fords, but he had a Rover 2000, very nice car. And Cecil came in one morning in distress to tell me that his car had been hijacked.
Oh, goodness.
It had been hijacked. But he was all right, and his wife had been with him at the time, so it was stressful. and he was in some distress about it. So then, shortly, that same morning, then the police rang through to him, and they said, "We've found your car. It's on the Falls Road, just between the Falls and the Springfield Road. It's sitting in a street. It looks to be okay. Will you come along and collect it?" So Cecil said, "Well, I can't really collect it. If it's in Indian country, I really don't feel I want to collect. Can the army not do something for me?" And they said, "Well, come on down to Springfield Road police station, and we'll organise something with an army patrol." So I said to Cecil, "If you want, I'll come with you, because at least I will be acceptable down there because I'm Samaritans."
Right.
So,
But how would they know that you were Samaritans?
no, they wouldn't know.
No. You'd be acceptable to who?
To the IRA, if we were confronting the IRA, this was in IRA territory. So anyway, we went down to the police station. Yes, they had organised an army patrol in one of these pig things.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And we all climbed into the back of that. The army said, "We're taking you along and we'll provide security, but you'll have to open the car yourselves. We have checked it out, and we don't think there's any booby
God.
but you have the keys we didn't have, and you will do your own thing." So Cecil was...
I'm sure he was.
So I said, "I'll do it." So I said to the army, "I'm doing it, but please assure me that you're fairly sure that it's safe."
Yes.
And they said, "Oh yes, we're fairly sure it's safe." So I got into the car, it was fine. The radio was taken.
That was all. My goodness.
But that was interesting in that they placed soldiers, 2 soldiers at one end of the street, 2 soldiers at the other, and they brought the pig up to the car. And
Dear me.
that was the worst I'd ever been and connect with the Troubles. And it turned out to be nothing.
Yes. Anyway.
So that was John Graham's. And Cecil was so proud of me for doing all of this for him.
Oh, well, that was nice. At least it was acknowledged.
It was acknowledged, yes. Well, I went into Graham's and gave my notice, written notice. And at that time, managing director was Ingram Bill. And by that time, Clarence had died. So Sir John was now the chairman. So they both came into the office together to me and said, "I'm sure you don't mean this. You're going to JMJ? That's a very new company. And what's worse, it's Catholic." I said, "Well, I'm neither a Protestant or Catholic, so I don't mind." "Oh, well, you really do want to think about your future, and your future is here."
Right.
And I said, "Yes, but my future here, while it may be secure, and I hope it will be, there's a glass ceiling. And I will never break through that glass ceiling here. I know that. Anybody who's going to make progress in this company will be Queen's graduates or qualified engineers.
Yeah.
And but you're already paid as well as any of them. In fact, you're about the best paid in the company."
Right. Did you know that?
I didn't know that. No. I'm not sure they believed it either.
Oh, okay.
But I said, just as a wee aside, I drive a Ford. What was it? Escort.
Escort, yes.
Escort. I drive a Ford Escort. And do you see me ever getting anything better than a Ford Escort? Because I like cars. And he said, "Well, we would want to think about that. It would make it difficult with the fleet of cars that we have, but we would like to think about that.
Okay.
And they talked to me for 2 hours,
Really?
the two of them, telling me all the reasons why I shouldn't. And then they said, look, Roy, go home, think on what I've said, and give us your decision tomorrow. So I went home, talked to Betty, and said, I'm going to go.
Right.
So I did, gave my final word to them the next day. Ingram said, I'm very sorry to lose you, Roy, but we'll wish you all the very best.
Mm-hmm.
And Sir John said, Roy, you're leaving us, goodbye.
Oh.
And I did 6 weeks then to tidy up all the stuff I'd done. And Ingram and I played squash together, and we did play a couple of games. But when John saw me, Sir John, he turned away the other way.
My goodness.
Didn't say a lot for him.
No, well, absolutely did not indeed. Yes.
So I think I've told you about driving into Graham's, a year later in my BMW 3
No. Oh, tell us that.
Well, Flutter had gone very well.
Yeah.
We had done very well in it, and we were being invited back that they would like us to be going forward into the Shetland one. Mm-hmm. But we were a bit on the small side, and really what you want to do, get a joint venture partner or even 2
Yes.
joint venture partners. This job is big enough.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
Tom McGinnis said to me, Roy, have you any ideas who we might joint venture partner with? I said, well, I only know the companies here in Northern Ireland, and obviously the best one is Graham's.
Mm-hmm.
He said, you know Graham's. He said, go and ask them.
All right.
Go and ask them if they're interested in joint venturing with us. So I made an appointment with Ingram and drove into Graham's in the Porsche's car. It was lovely.
I bet.
And all the guys that I knew,
Yes.
it was delicious.
Yes, I'm sure it was.
delicious.
Yes.
Anyway, we
Understand that?
talked about it, but it didn't,
They weren't interested.
They were vaguely interested, but they were not sure about the permanence of J&J.
Okay.
It may just fold up. So it didn't.
No.
Anyway, we then got joint ventured with Lilies of Glasgow and French Care of Bedford. And that went terribly well. And I was the principal guy for J&J in the joint venture, 3-way equal joint venture. And the other 2, each of the Lilies. I wish I could remember that guy's name, because he was a lovely fella, a senior engineer of Lilies, and then French Care provided the construction manager for the joint venture. And he was Len Brown, I remember him well. Very, very able guy, very, very able. In fact, they all were very able. These are contractors who are working on nationally and internationally.
Yeah.
And all very good. So I was in good company.
Mm-hmm.
Got on very well with them. And as the work expanded very rapidly from the original tender as the enterprise developed. Then of course there was new work coming out, new civils work coming out, and they came to us. Shell came to us, to the joint venture, and said, "Here's extra work. Can you fit that into your schedule?"
Right.
And that extra work then had to be priced, and the pricing in such a situation, and by the way, they had a very prominent firm of quantity surveyors, Franklin and Anders. Franklin and Anders, one of the big names in quantity surveying in the UK, and they had their representation there. So I was dealing with them in a lot of the negotiations. So the starting price point, as I saw it, was that I needed to take the original tender and all the items in that tender, all of them making up the total, and what I needed to do was that for each of those items, I need to analyse it for looking always at the price, then analyse it for what the constituent parts of that price are: the labour, the plant, and the materials. And of course, that's how the original tender should be done. I should simply have been referring back to the original
Yes.
tender documents,
Yes.
but nobody had them.
They hadn't. All right.
So that what I did was to analyse the thing always with a slant
Of
in
course.
our own direction, and always being able to present that to this is why the price is what it is. And it's based on that, and you can see that this is additional, this is the amount that will cost. And so it was
You made
fun.
lots of money.
It was fun.
So what year would that have been?
That was in 1974. It's 68.
68? No.
No, 78.
78.
Sorry, 78.
Okay, so how long were you on Orkney for? How long was
Well,
it?
on and off, Orkney took 8 years.
Oh, really?
No, not Orkney. Shetland. Orkney was only 18 months.
Okay. So it was 18 months and Shetland was 8
8 years.
years. My goodness.
But by that time, I was only, at the latter part of that, I was floating around the Middle East and different places for J&J, as well as being responsible for the final accounts. But I had a
Amazing.
great time.
Absolutely amazing.
Yes, one of the things that I like to think about was that as the term of the contract extended, it was to be 18 months.
Shetland.
Yes, Shetland.
Right,
The original
Okay.
contract, 14 million, 18 months, and more stuff added on. The original tender was 18 months. 2 summers and 1 winter.
Okay.
So 2 summers and 1 winter in 18 months in the price of 14 million. But then the next work was in the winter. And winter in Shetland is very different from summer.
Yes.
So I needed to find a way of uplifting the prices for winter working.
Right, okay.
And I devised a formula for doing it. Took it to Franklin and Anders, and they said, it's a bit too technical for us. Take it to MIS,
Oh, Manchester
Manchester.
Institute of whatever it is.
They specialise in this sort of thing.
Right.
So I made an appointment with Dr. So-and-so and took myself down to Manchester and went through the thing with him. And he brought in a couple of other guys and said, let's work on it for a week and we'll come back to you.
Oh, very good.
And so they came back and said, yes, everything's fine.
Brilliant.
I
Wow.
was so proud of that.
Well, you had every right to be very proud of that. That's amazing. Amazing. Well done. That's incredible, Dad.
Yes, it was. It was incredible.
Ah, we.
And it was done in such a way that we made a lot of money out of it.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
So yeah, that was good.
So who would have been paying that? Was it Shell?
Shell.
Yeah, Shell.
In fact, I'm not sure whether, I think they had a joint venture really, Shell and BP. The first one was with Occidental in Florida, Occidental Oil Company, which is an American oil company. And we did very well out of them too. They employed a firm of consultants from England, and Dr. So-and-so was the guy that I was dealing with, and he and I got on very well. His name was Phil Porteous, Dr. Phil Porteous. And Phil and I got on very well. I was very raw at that time, and he did teach me certain things that I picked up from certain things which stood me in good stead.
Yes,
But
very
yes,
good.
we got on.
Excellent.
You know, those were good days.
Yeah.
Yes, there was an unfortunate effect on me in that I thought that I couldn't do anything wrong. Business-wise.
Yeah.
Business-wise. And it affected me through right up to now. I'm still thinking that
And why is that a bad thing?
that's a bad thing.
It
Because
isn't.
I've overreached in so many ways.
Oh.
I mean,
It's amazing. The whole thing is just amazing. The whole story.
I'm sure I've bummed and blowed a lot in that, and it must show up in the recording.
But it's all true.
But it
All
is
you're
true.
doing is recording how things were. It must have been incredibly exciting to be part of that and
Yes. And then
to
flying
be
up and down.
spearheading that kind of success.
Yes, I would write up these long explanations of a particular thing. For instance, that winter working thing had to be explained in reams of paper, and then eventually accepted by Franklin and Andrews. But all of that stuff that I wrote all went copies of it went to head office in Glasgow and head office in Bedford. And the word coming back was that some of them wanted to know, was that written by Max Abramson?
Yeah. Okay.
No, it wasn't. It was written by Roy Collins.
Yes. He didn't have a law degree, but there you are.
Nor any degree.
No. But my goodness, it's just
But Max
amazing.
Abramson was the guy who wrote the
Yeah, I remember you talking
construction
about him.
manual.
And he was based in Dublin.
He was based in Dublin.
Yes, I remember you going down to meet him a few times. Yeah,
And terribly impressive man. Tremendously impressive.
yeah. Wowee, Dad, you had some amazing times.
Yes, it was good.
So what happened after Shetland then?
Well, it gets a bit bitty after that.
Okay.
It's a bit bitty. 1984. Well, okay, Shetland, back to head office. Head office. Tom McGuinness died.
And what year did he die?
It must have been 85, 86.
Okay.
Or maybe 85. And Mrs. McGuinness, Tom was major shareholder. His wife was not wishing to run a construction company. And who could blame her? So she found a buyer for it.
Oh yeah.
Well, somehow she found a buyer. Anyway, the first we knew about it was that a company from England called, it'll come to me, from Hampshire. Anyway, I should go back a stage here.
Okay.
I'd go back a stage because after Shetland, we had a lot of heavy equipment becoming available. John Graham, JMJ specialised in the heavy work, heavy earth moving on both Orkney and Shetland.
Okay.
Heavy earth moving, big dozers, big scrapers, big equipment, expensive equipment, millions of pounds worth of equipment. And what we're going to do with this stuff is, when Shetland is finished, one idea was coal mining.
Oh yes, okay.
So anyway, to short circuit that one, they did look at one or two small companies in Scotland who were doing work for the National Coal Board, and they were interested in partnership, but they discovered that the National Coal Board weren't interested in bringing anybody else in. So they had discovered that. So the idea then was, well, why don't we go out and do our own coal mining in America? Why not America? North America is full of coal. So Tom Hanley from Dublin, JMJ had taken over another little office in Dublin and become JMJ Ireland Limited. Their director was Tom Hanley, a fully qualified engineer and a thoroughly nice guy, very affable, very, very intelligent fellow. He went to America to suss out what might be available in the way of coal mining or joint venturing with an American coal miner or whatever. He set up a deal with the coal mining company for a specification on house coal to be brought from the mine by rail cars to Norfolk, Virginia, and transposed onto a ship, onto a ship for Northern Ireland, for Belfast. It worked to a degree. They got the coal onto the rail cars. They got the rail cars down to Norfolk, Virginia. But before putting it onto the ship, they needed to check the specification. And the specification stated the size of household coal.
Yes, yeah.
And this coal, by the time it had jiggled its way down through America, it was all in slack.
Oh no.
So, so of course, it was rejected.
Yes.
And it could be rejected. So it was rejected. The problem then came back to me. You're the legal guy in head office. So I said, well, obviously we have to sue them. So I said, I'll go with Tom Hanley. He's the guy that set it up. And we'll see about suing them. So I went to New York. Tom had got a law firm there who had connections to Ireland, as every American has.
Yep.
And so that law firm, we set up the problem with them, and they were very good. So they set up, they contacted the coal miner, who was big enough not to be put out of business by this.
My
So
goodness.
that was good.
Yes.
So anyway, I suppose I had 3 trips to New York in connection with this thing. The lawyers were good enough that they had talked specifically to the coal miner, the coal producer. They talked to the ship, the demurrage on the ship. The ship was sitting there waiting for the coal, no coal going on. It's sitting there on time, demurrage.
Right.
So it was costing $500,000 for the demurrage. And anyway, we were invited to do a deal, and Tom and I looked at the pros and cons of the deal and said, yes, we'll take it. And we got paid for our coal. The shipping people got paid for their ship, and that was the end of that.
Right.
So that was fun. That was real fun. That was my first introduction to New York.
New York, yeah, wow.